So there were many Jaws rip-offs in the decades that followed the Steven Spielberg blockbuster Jaws, but this one's a little more original and a little more thoughtful and a little more insightful than most, and it also managed to cling to the leather vest coattails of Mick Dundee just as surely as it clung to the gunnel of the Orca. So Dark Age substitutes a monster shark with a monster crocodile, and it substitutes Amity in New England with far north Queensland in Australia. Beautiful one day, perfect the next. So the premise of Dark Age is, of course, that we have a monster crocodile, a monster rogue crocodile terrorising communities in far north Queensland. It's eating its way through the local populace, and there's also a folkloric supernatural element to this particular beast, known to local Indigenous people as Numinwari, I believe. I've probably butchered the language there, so apologies if I have. And the crocodile is, of course, enormous, bigger than a boat. It takes out fishermen, and in a particularly gruesome scene with echoes of Alex Kittner, it takes a child swimming at a dock. And this also has a very interesting scene where a local elder adds a supernatural element to this tragic turn of events by alluding that the kid was always a bit sickly and always in hospital, and that was why the monster took him away. So he kind of alludes that it was in the natural scheme of things. So it's up to our hero, John Jarrett from The Odd Angry Shot, and Wolf Creek, who's a ranger in this film, and kind of a more serious, more eloquent version of Crocodile Dundee to track and kill the beast. But he has a renegade Quint character played by Max Phipps to deal with, who's just lost two of his mates to the monster crocodile, and he wants to blow the piss out of this particular crocodile and any other wildlife he can get in his sights. So Dark Age is a pretty satisfying Jaws and Crocodile Dundee inspired Ozploitation curio from the late 80s. It was a lot bigger overseas than it was here, ironically. Not sure why. Probably due to the success of Crocodile Dundee. It probably sounds a lot more lowbrow and exploitative than it actually is, but it is a little more dignified and a lot more thoughtful than most of the Jaws rip-offs. Probably because of the source material. Surprisingly, the novel this one's based on, which was called Dark Age, I believe, or Numinwari, was written by an actual crocodile expert, Graham Webb, a world-leading authority on these terrifying beasties, which lends a lot of credibility to Dark Age. So maybe that's why Dark Age, the film, is just a smidge more reserved and I guess more highbrow than what you'd expect going in. But don't let that dissuade you. It does have plenty of those wonderful exploitative elements that we all love so much. And also Dark Age is a veritable who's who of Australian cinema and television. You have Australian cinema royalty like John Jarrett and David Gulpilil, Max Phipps and Burnham, and you've got familiar television faces like Nicky Coghill from The Flying Doctors and Alf from Home and Away. So if you ever wanted to see Alf in a horror movie, this is the one. It's brought to us by legendary Ozploitation producer Anthony Janane, who made some of my favourite Ozploitation movies like Turkey Shoot, Patrick and Race for the Yankee Zephyr. And all in all, I can't really recommend Dark Age highly enough. It'd probably make a pretty good double bill with Black Water, which is a different take, but also a very satisfying take on Australia's scariest apex predator. In terms of social commentary, this one's brimming with it. Naturally, you have the clash of sensibilities between the original inhabitants and the more recent settlers, of course, as you'd expect from the subject matter. And we have the endless tug-of-war between the environment and human development. There's even the obligatory Jaws trope of evil developers versus nature, which was more in the Jaws novel. In this case, you've got a corrupt politician played by Alf from Home and Away, and he's mainly concerned that the 30-foot beast is standing between him and profiteering from the construction of a Japanese condominium. And as far as Ozploitation goes, this is one of the more entertaining, satisfying and fully realised examples you're likely to see. And the sort of movie that we really should be making more of here in Australia, if we're to save our film industry. We want more Wolf Creek, less of the whiny, self-absorbed claptrap that only seems to be existing to be gushed over by privileged people and the academia. That's my 2 cents anyway. And that, my friends, is Dark Age. Quite a cool little 80s Ozploitation time capsule. As Molly Meldrum might say, do yourself a favour with this one. I'm just going to step away from the waterway while I continue, just in case there's a monster Numinwari in there. And if this is your first time visiting the channel, hope you're enjoying this, hope you enjoyed the upload. And please let me know how my YouTube driving is by liking, sharing and subscribing and hyping, commenting, all that jazz. And basically I'm off to enjoy the rest of my Saturday. Hope you do as well, or whatever you're watching. And I look forward to seeing you next time.